Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more heart-touching tales. Wishing you a beautiful day now. Sit back and enjoy the story. Asterisk, the crystal champagne flute slipped from Madison's trembling fingers like water through a broken dam. Time fractured into 1,000 glittering pieces as the glass met the marble floor of the Grand Manhattan Hotel's lobby. The sound rang out across the elegant space where Manhattan's elite mingled in their designer gowns and $1,000 suits, every head turning toward the catastrophe unfolding in slow motion. Madison Parker, 25 and drowning in journalism. School debt watched her Friday night shift implode before her eyes. 3 more champagne trays balanced precariously in her arms as she stood frozen among the wreckage. Her server's uniform suddenly feeling like a spotlight in the sea of Armani. And Versace? No, she whispered, crouching down to gather the razor-sharp fragments. Her hands shook as she tried to salvage what remained of her dignity and hopefully her job. A shadow fell across her vision, strong fingers wrapped around her wrist, pulling her upward with such sudden force that she collided directly into a wall of solid muscle and expensive cologne. Her arms instinctively circled his neck to steady herself, and she found herself pressed against the most perfectly tailored suit she'd ever touched. Camera flashes erupted around them like fireworks. "What the hell?" she started to say, but his voice cut through her confusion like ice through silk. Perfect. Simply perfect. Madison tilted her head back and lost her breath entirely. The man holding her possessed the kind of devastating handsomeness that should have come with a warning label. Dark hair swept back with mathematical precision, eyes the color of winter storms, and a jawline that belonged in a Renaissance sculpture. Unfortunately, those perfect features were currently arranged in an expression of pure irritation. "Do you have any idea who I am?" His voice carried the kind of authority that could level buildings. "I don't," Madison managed, acutely aware that she was still trapped in his arms while photographers circled them like sharks sensing blood. "Connor Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Enterprises." His grip tightened around her waist. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." "Hey, you're the one who grabbed me," Madison shot back, finding her voice despite the chaos. Connor. The reporters pressed closer, their voices creating a cacophony of questions. "Who is she? Is this your new girlfriend? When did you start dating?" Connor's eyes closed for a moment, and Madison could practically see the calculations running behind his perfect features. When he opened them again, something dangerous flickered in those storm-blue depths. "You want a story?" he pealed out, loud enough for every microphone to catch. He pulled Madison impossibly closer, her body molding against his in a way that sent electricity shooting down her spine. "Here's your story." His mouth moved to her ear, his breath warm against her. "Skin? Smile like your life depends on it, because from this moment on, it does." Before Madison could ask what he meant, Connor straightened and addressed the crowd of hungry reporters with the confidence of a man who owned half the city. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Madison Parker. We'll be married next month." Madison's world tilted off its axis. The champagne-soaked floor seemed to shift beneath her feet as the words echoed through the lobby. Cameras clicked frantically, reporters shouted questions, and through it all, Connor held her against him like she was the most precious thing in his world. "What fiancé?" she whispered desperately against his shoulder. "Middle name, William," he murmured back, his smile never wavering for the cameras. "Connor William Mitchell. And you have exactly 5 seconds to decide whether you want to play the role of the most lovesick woman in Manhattan, or if you'd prefer to never work in this city again." Madison looked around at the sea of flashing lights, the expectant faces, the smartphones recording every second of what would undoubtedly become tomorrow's headline news. This impossible, arrogant man had just announced their engagement, because she'd accidentally fallen into his arms after breaking a champagne glass. He was completely insane. But as she stared up into those penetrating blue eyes, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers, and the intoxicating power that radiated from him like heat, Madison felt something she hadn't expected, a spark of wild, dangerous excitement. "You're absolutely crazy," she whispered. "Probably," he admitted, that perfectly sculpted mouth quirking upward. "So what's it going to be, darling? Madison Parker had always prided herself on making sensible decisions. She paid her bills on time, studied hard, and worked double shifts to afford her tiny apartment. She was practical, responsible, and boring. But standing in the arms of the most powerful man in New York, with cameras capturing every moment and her normal life crumbling around her like broken glass, Madison made the most reckless choice of her existence. Rising on her tiptoes, she pressed her lips to his cheek and declared loud enough for every reporter to hear, "I love you too, sweetheart. I can't wait to be Mrs. Mitchell." The crowd erupted in applause and camera flashes. But all Madison could focus on was the look of surprised admiration that crossed Connor's face. "Very good," he said softly, meant only for her ears. "Very good indeed." As they were surrounded by the media frenzy, Madison had one crystal-clear realization. Her quiet, predictable life had just ended in spectacular fashion. It's all because of an accidental embrace with the most arrogant man in New York. But why? Despite the terror coursing through her veins, did she feel more alive than she had in years? "Oh, and Madison," Connor whispered, as they posed for what felt like the 100th photo, "welcome to the Mitchell family. I hope you're ready, because my life is about to become yours, and it's anything but simple," as if summoned by his words. An elegant woman with silver hair and the bearing of royalty approached through the crowd, her expression promising storms. "Connor William Mitchell," she said in a voice that could have frozen champagne. "What exactly is happening here?" Connor's body tensed against Madison's. "Madison, meet my mother, Eleanor Mitchell." "Mother, my fiancée." Eleanor Mitchell's gaze swept over Madison like she was evaluating a potentially defective piece of merchandise. "We need to talk." Now, Madison realized with dawning horror that the accidental embrace was just the beginning. Something far more complex and dangerous than a simple misunderstanding. She'd fallen straight into the heart of the Mitchell family empire, and there was no going back. The Mitchell family penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of one of Manhattan's most exclusive buildings. And stepping inside felt like entering a world where money wasn't just power, it was oxygen. Madison perched on the edge of a leather sofa that probably cost more than her annual tuition, afraid to breathe too heavily on the priceless artwork surrounding her. Connor paced the living room like a caged predator, his earlier composure cracking under his mother's withering stare. Eleanor Mitchell commanded the space from behind an antique desk, checking her diamond-encrusted watch with the precision of a general planning a siege. 43 minutes, Eleanor announced. 43 minutes since your little performance. And we already have headlines in every major publication, trending hashtags across social media, and the stock price has jumped for points because investors think you've finally settled down. The stock went up. Connor stopped pacing, suddenly interested. "Oh yes." Eleanor's smile could have cut glass. "Apparently, a domesticated Connor Mitchell is worth billions to our shareholders." "Which means, Miss Parker, you're now worth billions." "To us? Temporarily?" Madison's head spun. "I just want to go home. Home." The penthouse door burst open, and a tornado in an expensive suit swept into the room. "Sweetheart, you are home. Welcome to the Mitchell family circus, population 3. Crazy people and whoever Connor decides to drag into his latest scheme." Madison stared at the newcomer, who looked exactly like Connor but with mischievous green eyes and a grin that suggested he'd never met trouble he couldn't charm his way out of. "Madison," Connor said wearily, "meet my younger brother Blake." "Blake, this is Madison, my supposed fiancée." "Supposed?" Blake circled Madison like she was a fascinating new species. "Hey, you mean she's real? I thought the news reports were just another one of your elaborate business maneuvers. Remember when you pretended to be allergic to shellfish for 3 months to avoid the Peterson merger?" Blake Connor warned. "Or the time you fake dated that supermodel to distract from the quarterly losses." Blake's grin widened. "But usually you give people a heads up before you ruin their lives. Please tell me you warned her." A cold weight settled in Madison's stomach. "Warned me about what?" Blake's expression shifted to something resembling sympathy about the fact that Connor Mitchell doesn't do real relationships. He's been engaged 4 times in the past 2 years. All fake, all for business. He's like the corporate world's serial. Monogamist, except without the actual romance. 4 times? Madison's voice cracked. Remember Jessica, the lawyer? And that senator's daughter? What was her name? Enough?
Ow.
Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. It's both of you. Sit down. We need damage control, not a family therapy session. As they settled into the opulent living room, Madison felt like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole, except instead of Wonderland. She'd landed in a world where fake engagements were as common as board meetings. Here's the situation, Eleanor. Continued pulling out a tablet? The story is trending nationwide. Mitchell engagement is the #1 hashtag in New York. Every society blogger is speculating about the wedding. Most importantly, our investors are ecstatic. But it's all fake, Madison protested. Is it? Eleanor's eyebrows arched. Because from where I'm sitting, you announced your engagement to my son in front of 50 witnesses and countless cameras? The legal implications alone could keep our attorneys busy for years. Madison shot to her feet. That's it. I'm leaving. This is insane. You're all insane. She stormed toward the elevator, but Blake's voice stopped her cold. Madison, wait. If you leave now, what happens to your story? She turned around slowly. What story? Blake's grin returned. The story about how Connor Mitchell, Manhattan's most ruthless businessman, fell head over heels for a regular girl who doesn't give a damn about his money. Do you have any idea how much that exclusive is worth to a journalism student? Madison hated that he had a point. As much as she wanted to flee this madhouse, the reporter in her recognized the opportunity of a lifetime. Plus, Blake added, you've got front row seats to the Mitchell family drama. Trust me, we're way more entertaining than Netflix. Eleanor shot Blake a look that could have melted steel, then turned to Madison with renewed focus. What Blake is inelegantly trying to say is that we have a proposition for you, Miss Parker. What kind of proposition? 1 month, Eleanor said crisply. Play the role of Connor's devoted fiancé for exactly 1 month. Attend a few social events, smile for the cameras, convince the world that my son has finally found true love. Return, we'll pay you $50,000. Madison's jaw dropped. $50,000 would cover her final year of college and then some. Plus, Connor added, speaking for the first time since Blake's arrival, I'll give you exclusive access to Mitchell Enterprises. Insider information, board meetings, family dynamics. Enough material to launch your journalism career into the stratosphere. Madison looked around the room at Eleanor, calculating and imperious but undeniably impressive. At Blake, who treated life like an elaborate game. At Connor, whose intense blue eyes seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed defenses. 1 month? She asked. 1 month, Connor confirmed. Then we stage a very public, very amicable breakup. You return to your normal life with a substantial bank account and enough exclusive content to write your own ticket in journalism. Go back to my regularly scheduled business arrangements. Everyone wins. What about your other engagements? The real ones? There are no real ones, Connor said quietly. There never have been. Everything I do is calculated, planned, and executed for maximum business advantage. Personal relationships are just another form of merger in my world. Something in his voice made Madison study his face more carefully. Beneath the polished exterior and commanding presence, she glimpsed something that looked almost like loneliness. So what do you say? Eleanor prompted. $50,000 for 30 days of playing dress-up? Madison took a deep breath. $50,000 would change her life. The story access could launch her career, and if she were being completely honest with herself, the thought of spending a month in Connor Mitchell's world, unraveling the mystery of the man behind the corporate facade, wasn't entirely unpleasant. I have conditions, she said finally. Name 'em, Connor replied. First, no more surprise announcements. If you're going to make me part of your life, I want to know what I'm walking into before it happens. Fair enough. Second, I want my own room. A nice one. With a lock. Done. Third, Madison looked directly at Eleanor. I want respect. I may not be from your social circle, but I'm not stupid, and I'm not desperate. Treat me like a partner. in this arrangement, not like hired help. Eleanor studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You have more backbone than I expected. Very well, Miss Parker. I believe we can work together. Then we have a deal, Madison said, extending her hand to Connor. When their fingers touched, electricity shot up her arm, and she saw her own, surprise reflected in his eyes. For a moment, the elaborate penthouse and watching family members faded away, leaving only the two of them and the dangerous current sparking between them. Welcome to the family business, Connor said softly, his thumb brushing across her knuckles before he released her hand. Blake whooped and clapped his hands. This is going to be the best month ever. Can't wait to see how this plays out. Eleanor gathered her papers with military efficiency. The first event is tomorrow night, the Ashworth Charity Gala. Madison, you'll need appropriate attire. I'll have my personal shopper deliver selections in the morning. Wait, Madison said, reality crashing back over her. Tomorrow night. I need time to prepare, to figure out how to act like your fiancé without looking like a complete fraud. Connor's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Don't worry. I'll teach you everything you need to know about being a Mitchell. Is that a promise or a threat? Madison asked. With my family, Blake interjected cheerfully. It's usually both. As Madison was shown to what would be her room for the next month, a palatial suite with windows overlooking Central Park, she wondered what she'd gotten herself into. She'd agreed to fake an engagement with a man who collected fiancés like other people collected business cards, in a family where money was the only language that mattered. But as she stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights twinkle below like earthbound stars, Madison felt that same dangerous spark of excitement she'd experienced in Connor's arms. Maybe the next month would be the adventure she'd never known she was waiting for. Or maybe it would destroy everything she thought she knew about herself. Either way, there was no turning back now. Madison stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror and barely recognized herself. The midnight blue Valentino gown hugged every curve like liquid silk, transforming her struggling journalism student into someone who belonged in the pages of Vogue. Eleanor's personal shopper had worked magic, but Madison felt like she was wearing a costume for a role she'd never auditioned for. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting to see Blake with another one of his ridiculous pep talks. Instead, Connor filled the doorway, resplendent in a black tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and made his blue eyes look almost electric. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You look," Connor began, then stopped, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "You look beautiful." Heat flooded Madison's cheeks. "Thank you. Your mother's shopper has excellent taste." "It's not the dress," Connor said quietly, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him, "though it doesn't hurt." The space between them seemed to crackle with unspoken tension.
Madison
busied herself with her clutch, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened whenever he was near. "Are you ready for tonight?" Connor asked, settling into the chair across from her vanity. "Define ready." "I've memorized your corporate history, your family background, and approximately 73 fake romantic details about our supposed courtship. I'm as prepared as someone can be for lying to Manhattan's elite." Connor's mouth quirked upward. "You've been studying." "I don't like failing at things, even fake things." Madison met his eyes in the mirror. "Let me again why this charity gala is so important." Connor's expression grew serious. "The Ashworth family controls a significant portion of Manhattan's commercial real estate. Their support could make or break the Hudson Development Project, which represents the largest expansion in Mitchell Enterprises history. And they need to believe you're settled and stable to back the project?" "Exactly. Old money families like the Ashworths value tradition, family, and commitment. A bachelor CEO is unpredictable. A married man with roots is a safe investment." Madison turned to face him directly. "What happens if we get caught? If someone realizes this is all fake?" Connor was quiet for so long that Madison wondered if he'd heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't expected. "Then I lose everything I've spent the last 10 years building. Mitchell Enterprises isn't just a company, Madison. It's my father's legacy, my family's future, the livelihood of thousands of employees. If this fails, he didn't finish. But Madison heard the unspoken ending. If this fails, he loses everything that matters to him. No pressure then, she said lightly, but her hand found his without conscious thought. Connor, what if I mess this up? What if I say the wrong thing, or use the wrong fork, or commit some social sin that exposes us? Connor's fingers tightened around hers. Look at me, he said, and she turned to meet his gaze fully. You're brilliant, you're quick on your feet, and you've already proven you can think under pressure. Besides, his thumb traced across her knuckles, you won't be alone. I'll be right there with you. Something in his voice made Madison's chest tighten. For a moment, she forgot this was all pretend, forgot about the business arrangements and fake engagements. The man looking at her with such intensity felt completely real. The elevator chimed in the distance, breaking the spell. That'll be Blake, Connor said, releasing her hand and standing. Ready to go convince New York's most suspicious socialites that we're madly in love? Madison took a deep breath and smoothed her dress. Let's go sell the performance of our lives. The Ashworth estate in the Upper East Side looked like something from a fairy tale. If fairy tales involve security checkpoints and valet parking for Maseratis, as their car pulled up to the grand entrance, Madison felt her nerves spike. Remember, Connor murmured as he helped her from the car. We've been secretly dating for 6 months. You swept me off my feet with your intelligence and your complete indifference to my money. No. One proposed last week in Central Park during sunset. Right, secret dating, intelligence, sunset proposal. Madison forced a smile as camera flashes erupted. Around them? Anything else I should know? Yes. Connor's arm slipped around her waist, pulling her close as they approached the photographers. Try to look like you're crazy about me. That might be easier than you think, Madison murmured, then immediately regretted the honesty in her voice. Connor's steps faltered slightly, and she felt his gaze on her profile, but there was no time to analyze the moment. They were swept into the glittering chaos of Manhattan's social elite, all air kisses and calculating smiles. Connor Darling, a woman with perfect blonde hair and predatory eyes, glided toward them. You must introduce me to your mysterious fiancé, Madison. This is Vivian Ashworth, our hostess. Vivian, my fiancé, Madison Parker. Vivian's smile could have cut diamonds. How lovely. And where did you two meet? I don't recall seeing Madison at any of our usual events. Madison felt the weight of dozens of eyes turning their way, sensing blood in the water. This was the test, the moment that would determine whether their charade survived the night. Actually, Madison said, her voice steady despite her racing. Connor spilled coffee all over my laptop at a small cafe in Soho. He felt so guilty that he insisted on buying me a new one. And somehow, one coffee date turned into 6 months of the most incredible romance of my life. How charmingly. Ordinary, Vivian said, her tone suggesting ordinary was somewhere between tragic and contagious. I prefer authentic, Madison replied sweetly. There's something beautiful about love that happens in the real world, don't you think? Connor's fingers pressed against her back, a silent signal of approval, and Madison felt a rush of confidence. The evening became a carefully orchestrated dance of half-truths and strategic affection. Connor never left her side, his hand constantly at her waist or tangled with her fingers, creating an intimate bubble that made the performance feel less like acting and more like something dangerously close to reality. During dinner, Madison found herself genuinely laughing at Connor's dry observations about their fellow guests. During the speeches, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. During the dancing, when he pulled her into his arms for a slow waltz, the rest of the world seemed to fade away entirely. You're a natural at this, Connor murmured as they swayed together, his breath warm against her ear. At lying? Madison asked. At being yourself. They're all trying so hard to impress each other that they've forgotten what authentic looks like. You're like a breath of fresh air in a room full of expensive perfume. Madison tilted her head back to look at him. Is that your way of saying I'm doing okay? You're doing more than okay. You're remarkable. The sincerity in his voice made Madison's steps falter. For a heartbeat, she saw something in Connor's eyes that looked nothing like pretense, and everything like genuine admiration. Connor, she began, but her words were cut off by a commotion near the bar. Well. If it isn't Connor Mitchell and his latest acquisition. Madison turned to see a tall man with silver hair and cold gray eyes approaching, flanked by what looked like a small army of business associates. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Grandfather, Connor said, his voice carefully neutral. I didn't know you were attending tonight. Wouldn't miss it for the world, the older man replied, his gaze fixing on Madison like a hawk spotting prey, especially not when my grandson is making such interesting announcements. You must be the waitress. Madison felt Connor tense beside her, but she stepped forward with her most gracious smile. Madison Parker. And you must be Richard Mitchell. Connor's told me so much about you, has he? Richard's smile was all teeth and no warmth. How fascinating. Tell me, Miss Parker, what exactly do you see in my grandson? His money? His connections? His ability to solve problems that might otherwise ruin a young woman's future? The words hit like physical blows, but Madison refused to flinch. Around them, conversations began to quiet as people sensed drama brewing. I see a man who works 18-hour days because he cares about the thousands of people who depend on his company for their livelihoods, Madison said clearly. I see someone who remembers the coffee preferences of every employee on his executive floor. I see a man who called his mother 3 times yesterday just to check on her arthritis. I see someone worth loving for exactly who he is, not what he can provide. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard Mitchell's expression shifted from predatory to something resembling surprise. Interesting, he said finally. Very interesting. Indeed. He turned and walked away without another word, his entourage trailing behind him like expensive shadows. Madison realized she was shaking. Connor's arm tightened around her waist, anchoring her. That, Connor said quietly, was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most foolish. Probably both, Madison admitted, her voice barely steady. Madison. Connor turned her to face him, his hands framing her face gently. What you just said about me, about who you see when you look at me, did you mean it? Madison looked into his eyes, those storm-blue depths that seemed to see straight through every defense she'd ever built. The honest answer terrified her, because somewhere between the fake engagement and the charity gala performance, she'd stopped pretending to care about Connor Mitchell. Every word she whispered, Connor's expression shifted, becoming something raw and vulnerable and completely unguarded. For a moment, Madison thought he might kiss her right there in front of everyone. She realized with startling clarity that she wanted him to. Instead, he leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. Madison, I need to tell you something. This whole arrangement, this fake engagement, I think I'm Connor. Blake appeared at their side, slightly breathless and grinning like he'd won the lottery. You need to see this. The Ashworth project approval just came through. They're announcing it tonight. You did it, brother. You actually did it. Madison felt Connor pull away, both physically and emotionally, as his business mask slipped back into place. Whatever he'd been about to say was lost in the celebration that erupted around them. But as they were congratulated and photographed and toasted by Manhattan's elite, Madison couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them tonight. The question was whether Connor felt it too, or if she was falling for a man who saw her as nothing more than a very effective business strategy. Either way, she was in far deeper than $50,000 and a good story. She was in danger of losing her heart entirely. Madison woke to sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse bedroom, and for a blissful moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back with the force of a tidal wave. 3 weeks into their arrangement, and she was no longer pretending to be attracted to Connor Mitchell. She was falling in love with him, and it was going to destroy everything. The revelation had been building for days, through quiet dinners, where his dry humor made her laugh until her sides ached, through late-night conversations about books and dreams and the weight of family expectations, through stolen moments when his carefully constructed walls came down and she glimpsed the man beneath the corporate armor. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Blake with morning coffee and gossip instead. Kana entered carrying a tray with what looked like her favorite breakfast from the cafe where they'd supposedly met, Her heart clenched at the thoughtful gesture. "Remembered," she said softly. "I remember everything about you," Connor replied, setting the tray on her bedside table. "How you take your coffee, the way you bite your lip when you're thinking, the fact that you hate mornings but love sunrise." Madison sat up, pulling the silk robe tighter around herself, suddenly aware of how intimate this felt. Connor in her bedroom, morning light highlighting the sharp planes of his face, speaking to her like she was precious rather than purchased. "Connor, we need to talk." Something in her voice made him go still. "That sounds ominous. This arrangement, what we're doing, it's getting complicated." Connor sat on the edge of her bed, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Complicated how?" Madison took a shaky breath. "I think I'm starting to forget it's fake." The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. Connor's expression was unreadable, but she saw his hands clench against his thighs. "Madison," he began, but was interrupted by the sound of the elevator chiming in the distance. "Are you expecting someone?" Madison asked. Connor's face went pale. "No, it's too early for Blake, and Mother always calls first." Heavy footsteps echoed through the penthouse, accompanied by voices Madison didn't recognize. Connor shot to his feet, his business instincts taking over. "Stay here," he said, but Madison was already reaching for her robe. "Absolutely not. In this together, remember?" They emerged from the bedroom wing to find three men in expensive suits standing in the living room, their presence filling the space with an air of barely contained menace. Madison recognized one of them from business magazines. Marcus Carrington, CEO of Carrington Industries and Connor's biggest competitor. "Gentlemen," Connor said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that had built empires, "this is highly irregular. My security should have announced you." "Your security was very accommodating once we explained the urgency of our visit," Marcus replied, his smile predatory. "We wouldn't want to keep you from your lovely fiancée any longer than necessary." Madison felt Connor tense beside her. "Was very wrong. What do you want, Marcus?" Connor asked. "Straight to business. I admire that." Marcus pulled out a tablet and swiped across the screen. "We want to discuss your engagement to Miss Parker here. Specifically, how it relates to your recent business successes." Madison's blood turned to ice. They knew. Somehow, these men had figured out their arrangement was fake. "I'm not sure what you're implying," Connor said carefully. "Oh, I think you do." Marcus turned the tablet toward them and Madison's heart stopped. The screen showed a series of photographs. Connor at the coffee shop where they'd supposedly met, but the time stamp showed he'd been there alone, weeks before their encounter at the hotel. More photos showed Connor's previous fake engagements, each one coinciding with major business deals. "Interesting pattern, don't you think?" Marcus continued. "Connor Mitchell, serial fake fiancés, using romantic arrangements to manipulate business. Outcomes: the Ashworth project approval, the recent stock surge, and Yvonne the Mitchell family's reputation rehabilitation. It's all tied to your very convenient engagement announcements." Madison felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Connor's previous fake engagements hadn't been random business strategies. They'd been part of a calculated, long-term manipulation of market confidence and family relationships. "You have no proof of anything improper," Connor said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence, "don't we?" One of Marcus's associates stepped forward with another tablet. "We have financial records showing payments to previous fiancés. We have testimony from hotel staff about your methods for selecting targets. And we have a very interesting conversation recorded at last night's business dinner, where your grandfather expressed some fascinating opinions about your latest acquisition." Madison's chest tightened. "What conversation?" Marcus smiled like a shark scenting blood. Richard Mitchell is speaking very candidly about how his grandson has finally learned to choose his fake fiancés more carefully. "Apparently you're much more convincing than the previous actresses he hired." The words hit Madison like physical blows. She turned to Connor, searching his face for denial, for explanation, for anything that would make this nightmare make sense. Instead, she saw guilt, written across his features like a confession. "Madison," Connor began, reaching for her, but she stepped back as if he'd struck her. "It's true, isn't it?" Her voice came out as a whisper. All of it. The other engagements, the payments, the calculated selection of women to manipulate for. Business advantage. It's not what you think, Connor said desperately. With them, yes, it was business. But with you, everything changed. What we have is real. What we have is a contract. Madison's voice cracked as the full scope of her humiliation crashed over her. $50,000 for 30 days of playing pretend? How stupid could I be? Miss Parker, Marcus interjected smoothly. We're prepared to offer you a better deal. Full documentation of Connor's fraudulent business practices. Evidence of his manipulation of stock prices through fake relationships, and now material too. Expose Mitchell Enterprises for the House of Cards. It really is. In exchange, you help us bring down the Mitchell family empire. Madison stared at him in horror. You want me to destroy Connor's company? We want you to expose the truth. Connor Mitchell has been manipulating markets and investors for years through fraudulent relationships. The Hudson Project alone represents billions in contracts awarded based on deception. Madison looked between Marcus and Connor, feeling like she was drowning in quicksand. Everything she thought she knew about Connor, about their arrangement, about the feelings growing between them, had been built on lies within lies. Get out, Connor said quietly, his voice carrying deadly promise. All of you now. Oh, we're leaving, Marcus replied, gathering his materials. But Miss Parker has our contact information. When you're ready to stop being a pawn in Connor's games and start playing for the winning team, call us. After they left, the penthouse felt like a tomb. Madison and Connor stood facing each other across the living room. The morning sunlight that had seemed so beautiful an hour ago now harsh and revealing. How much of it is true? Madison asked, her voice barely audible. Connor ran his hands through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. The previous engagements, yes, they were business arrangements. Contracted, professional, limited in scope. And the payments? Standard compensation for services rendered. Madison flinched at the clinical language. So I'm just the latest in a long line of hired girlfriends. No. Connor stepped toward her, his expression desperate. Madison, you have to understand. Everything I've built, everything my family depends on, it all requires maintain integert a year. In my world, perception is reality. Stable personal life translates to stable business prospects. So you decided to buy yourself a stable personal life? Initially, yes. But with you, everything changed. What started as a business arrangement became something real. These past 3 weeks, getting to know you, talking with you, watching you, handle my family and my world with such grace and intelligence. Madison, I'm falling in love with you. The words she'd dreamed of hearing now felt like knives. How can I believe anything you say? How do I know this isn't just another manipulation, another calculated move in your business strategy? Because I'm telling you the truth. The truth. Madison laughed bitterly. You've been lying to me since the moment we met. You researched? Me. Selected me. And orchestrated our entire meeting at the hotel. What part of any of this has been true? Connor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw with something that sounded like pain. The way I feel when you look at me like I'm more than just a balance sheet. The way my heart stops when you smile. The way I've started imagining a future that includes more than just quarterly reports and board meetings. The way you make me want to be the man you see when you look at me, instead of the man I've had to become to survive in this world. Madison felt tears burning behind her eyes. Connor, I want to believe you. But how can I trust my own feelings when I don't even know what's real anymore? Then let me show you. Connor reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. This is your contract, all $50,000 plus a bonus for exemplary performance. Take it and walk away. Go back to your life, finish school, forget. You ever met me? Madison stared at the envelope like it might bite her. What are you saying? I'm saying I release you from our arrangement. No strings, no obligations, no consequences. You're free to go or free to stay. But if you stay, it won't be because of money or contracts or business advantages. It will be because you choose to be here with me, and if I go, Connor's smile was heartbreaking. Then I'll spend the rest of my life remembering the 3 weeks when I was the happiest I've ever been, because someone saw something worth loving in me. Madison took the envelope with shaking hands. $50,000. Freedom. The ability to walk away from this beautiful, terrifying, complicated man who'd turned her world upside down. There's something else you should know, Connor said, quietly. Marcus Carrington isn't trying to expose fraud for noble reasons. He wants to acquire Mitchell Enterprises at a fraction of its value once the scandal destroys our stock price. If you help him, you'll be destroying not just me, but thousands of jobs, my family's legacy, and everything my father built. So even this is manipulation, Madison said. Telling me about the consequences to make me choose your side, Connor replied. It's me being honest about the stakes, because you deserve to make your decision with all the facts. Whatever you choose, Madison, I'll respect it. But I needed you to know that what I feel for you is the most real thing in my life. Madison looked at the envelope in her hands, then at Connor's face, seeing the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide. Outside, New York City hummed with its usual chaos, oblivious to the fact that her entire world was fracturing. I need time to think, she said finally. Connor nodded. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready, whatever you decide. As Madison walked toward her room, she felt the weight of choice pressing down on her shoulders. Stay and risk everything. On a man who'd already proven he was capable of elaborate deceptions. Leave and wonder forever if she'd walked away from something real. Either way, her life would never be the same. But first she had a decision to make that would determine not just her future, but the fate of everyone she'd come to care about in the Mitchell family. The question was, could she trust her heart when her mind was screaming warnings? Only one thing was certain. By tomorrow, everything would change. Madison stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse bedroom, watching the city lights blur through her tears. The envelope containing $50,000 sat unopened on her dresser, while Marcus Carrington's business card burned. Like a brand in her palm, 24 hours had passed since her world imploded, and she was no closer to a decision. Stay with Connor and risk being manipulated again, or destroy him and walk away with her integrity intact. But her heart shattered. A soft knock interrupted her spiral of doubt. "Come in," she called, expecting Blake with another attempt at brotherly intervention. Instead, Eleanor Mitchell entered, her usual regal bearing replaced by something that looked almost like uncertainty. "Mrs. Mitchell," Madison said, quickly wiping her eyes. "I wasn't expecting you. May I sit?" Eleanor asked, and for the first time since they'd met, she actually waited for permission. Madison nodded, settling into the chair across from her. In the lamplight, Eleanor looked older, more fragile, but no less formidable. "I assume you've heard about yesterday's visit from Mr. Carrington," Eleanor said. "Connor told you?" Blake did. "My youngest son has never been able to keep secrets." Eleanor's smile was wan. "I came to apologize, Miss Parker, and to tell you the truth about my family, since it seems truth has been in short supply lately." Madison braced herself for another revelation. "Connor's father died when he was 17, Eleanor began, her voice soft with memory. "Completely unexpected. Connor went from being a teenager worried about college applications to being responsible for a multi-billion-dollar company and his younger brother's future." "I didn't know," Madison said quietly. "Of course you didn't. Connor doesn't talk about it. He doesn't talk about the night terrors he had for 2 years after his father died, or the way he threw himself into business because it was the only way he could honor his father's memory. He doesn't talk about turning down Harvard to stay in New York and learn the company, or the way he's worked 8-hour days for the past decade to prove himself worthy of the Mitchell name." Eleanor's eyes grew distant. "I failed him, Miss Parker. I was so consumed by my own grief that I didn't see how much pressure I was putting on him to be perfect, to never make mistakes, to sacrifice everything personal for the sake of business." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand that Connor's fake engagements weren't born from callousness or manipulation. They were born from desperation. He believed, because I taught him to believe, that his personal worth was tied to his business success. That love was a luxury he couldn't afford. Madison felt her chest tighten, but he did it anyway. He hired women to pretend to love him. Yes, Eleanor said simply, and it was wrong. But Madison, in 3 weeks with you, I've seen my son become someone I barely recognize. He laughs at breakfast. He asks about your day. He turns off his phone during dinner. For the first time in 10 years, Connor is living like a human being instead of a corporate machine. How do I know any of that is real? Eleanor leaned forward, her expression intense. Because yesterday, after you left, Connor called an emergency. Board meeting. He confessed everything to our directors. The fake engagements, the business arrangements, all of it. He resigned as CEO, effective immediately. Madison's world tilted.
What?
He walked away from everything? Madison? The company, his position, his inheritance. He said he couldn't continue to build success on lies, and he couldn't ask you to love a man who wasn't worthy of it. Where is he now? Gone. He took a bag and left this morning. Blake thinks he's at the cabin in Vermont, but Connor isn't taking calls. Madison stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Connor had sacrificed everything, the same way she'd been preparing to do by walking away from him. Mrs. Mitchell, why should I believe this isn't just another manipulation, another way to keep me in line? Eleanor was quiet for so long that Madison turned to look at her. The older woman's face was streaked with tears. Because I've spent the last 24 hours watching my family fall apart, Eleanor said, her voice breaking. Blake is furious with me for putting so much pressure on Connor. The board is in chaos. The stock price is plummeting. And my eldest son, the light of my life, has disappeared because he'd rather lose everything than hurt you again. Madison felt something crack inside her chest. He really resigned? He really resigned. And Miss Parker, if you're planning to help Marcus Carrington destroy what's left of our company, I won't stop you. We probably deserve it. But I need you to know that Connor doesn't. Whatever his mistakes, whatever mine, he's a good man who got lost trying to be perfect. After Eleanor left, Madison sat in the gathering darkness of her room, Connor's words echoing in her memory. What I feel for you is the most real thing in my life. She thought about the man who'd remembered her favorite breakfast, who'd defended her against his grandfather's cruelty, who'd looked at her like she was precious instead of purchased. She thought about late-night conversations and quiet laughter and the way her heart raced. Whenever he walked into a room, she thought about Connor, walking away from everything he'd built rather than ask her to stay under false pretenses. Maybe love wasn't about perfect circumstances or guarantees of truth. Maybe it was about choosing to trust despite the risks, about believing in someone's capacity to become better rather than condemning them for their past mistakes. Madison picked up her phone and dialed Blake's number. Madison, thank God. Please tell me you're not planning to burn down our lives. Blake, I need Connor's location. Why? Are you going to kill him or save him? Because honestly, either option would be an improvement over the current situation. Going to tell him the truth? Which is... Madison took a deep breath. That I love him. The real him, not the perfect version, not the business arrangement, not the Mitchell heir, the man who calls his mother to check on her arthritis and remembers how. I take my coffee and makes me laugh until my sides hurt. Blake was quiet for a moment. He's at the family cabin in Vermont. I'll text you the address, Blake. Is he okay? He's been better? Madison, whatever you decide, please be gentle with him. I know Connor seems invincible, but he's been through enough. 2 hours later, Madison was driving through the Vermont mountains in a rented car, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd left Marcus Carrington's business card torn into pieces on her dresser. Along with a note for Eleanor explaining her decision, the cabin was exactly what she'd expected from the Mitchell family, rustic in the way that only money could buy. Perched on a lake that reflected the stars like scattered diamonds, light glowed in the windows and smoke curled from the chimney. Madison sat in her car for a moment, gathering courage. Then she walked to the front door and knocked. When Connor opened it, her breath caught. He looked devastated. His hair was disheveled, his eyes redrimmed, his usually perfect appearance completely abandoned. He stared at her like she was a mirage. "Madison?" His voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "I came to tell you that you're an idiot," she said, stepping past him into the warm cabin. "I'm sorry." Madison turned to face him, her heart breaking at the defeated slump of his shoulders. "You're an idiot for thinking I could walk away from you. You're an idiot for resigning from your company instead of fighting for it. And you're an idiot for not trusting that what we have is strong enough to survive the truth." Connor closed the door slowly. "Madison, I lied to you. I manipulated you. I'm exactly the kind of man you should run from." "You were." Madison agreed. Past tense. "But people change, Connor. People grow. People become better when they find something worth becoming better for. You deserve someone who's never made the mistakes I've made." Madison stepped closer, close enough to see the hope flickering in his eyes, despite his words. "Who chooses to be honest with me going forward, even when it's hard? I deserve someone who loves me enough to walk away from everything rather than hurt me. I deserve someone who makes me feel like the most important person in their world." "Madison," Connor whispered, "you want to know what I see when I look at you? I see a man who was 17 years old when he inherited impossible responsibility. I see someone who spent 10 years trying to honor his father's memory and protect his family, even when the methods were wrong. I see someone brave enough to admit his mistakes and strong enough to change." Connor's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize she was crying. "God, I love you," he said simply. "Not because you're convenient for business, not because you fit some predetermined criteria, but because you're brilliant and brave, and you make me want to be worthy of you." "Then prove it," Madison said. "Come back to New York with me. Fight for your company the right way this time. Let me help you rebuild what you've torn down, but do it with honesty instead of manipulation. The board won't take me back. Not after what I confessed." Madison smiled through her tears. "Blake might have mentioned that 3 board members resigned in protest of your resignation. Apparently, they'd rather have an honest leader who makes mistakes than a perfect one who doesn't exist. Eleanor is campaigning to have you reinstated as CEO. And the Ashworth family has publicly stated they'll only work with Mitchell Enterprises. If Connor Mitchell is running it," Connor stared at her in amazement. "They want me back? They want you back. Your family wants you back. Your employees want you back." Madison rose on her tiptoes, her arms circling his neck. "And I want you back, if you'll have me. Not as a fake fiancé or a business arrangement, but as someone who chooses to love you every single day." Connor's mouth found hers in a kiss that felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "What about the $50,000? He asked Madison. Laughed. "Keep it. Consider it a retainer for my new job as your personal truth keeper. Someone needs to make sure Connor Mitchell stays honest. Is that a lifetime position, if you're lucky?" Connor's smile was brighter than all the stars reflected in the lake outside. "Madison Parker, will you marry me? Not for business, not for appearances, not for any reason, except that I love you more than I ever thought possible, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you." Madison looked into the eyes of the man who'd turned her world upside down, who challenged her, frustrated her, and ultimately taught her that love wasn't about perfect circumstances, but about choosing each other despite the imperfections. "Yes," she said simply, "but I have one condition. Anything. No more fake engagements. From now on, we deal in truth, even when it's messy." Connor laughed, the sound rich and full of joy. "Deal, though, I should warn you. My truth is that I'm completely, hopelessly, irrevocably in love with you." "I can live with that truth," Madison said. Kissed him again as snow began to fall outside the cabin windows, covering the world in something pure and new. 6 months later, Madison Parker became Madison Mitchell in a ceremony that made headlines. Not for its business implications, but for the obvious joy radiating from both bride and groom. Connor had returned to Mitchell Enterprises as CEO, but with new policies about transparency and ethical business practices. Blake had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer, where his charm and Connor's reformed ruthlessness made a formidable combination. Eleanor. Mitchell had tearfully admitted that Madison was the daughter-in-law she'd never dared hope for. And Marcus Carrington had been forced to abandon his hostile takeover when Mitchell Enterprises' stock soared to record highs under Connor's honest leadership. But Madison's favorite part of their story wasn't the fairy tale ending or the business success or even the spectacular wedding. It was the quiet moments. Connor brings her coffee every morning, perfectly prepared. The way he still reached for her hand during important meetings, like she was his anchor. The way he'd kept his promise to choose truth over convenience. Even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult. As she stood in their penthouse, now truly their home. Watching her husband play with their nephew in the living room where their fake engagement had been negotiated, Madison marveled at how much their lives had changed. She'd set out to write a story about Manhattan's elite and ended up living a love story she could never have imagined. Connor looked up and caught her watching, his smile still capable of making her heart skip beats. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Mitchell?" he asked. "Just remembering the night I fell into your arms and accidentally changed both our lives." Connor stood, crossing to her with the same intensity that had captured her. "Attention in that hotel lobby. Best accident of my life," he said, pulling her close, "even though I broke your champagne glass, especially because you broke my champagne glass. It was the first honest thing that happened to me in years." Madison laughed, the sound echoing. Through their home, their real home, built on real love and real trust, and the beautiful, messy truth of two imperfect people choosing each other every single day. The end.